यथाज प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम्।
असतो मा सत्कमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय आविराविर्मयेधि रुद्रयत्ते दक्षिणं मुखं तेन मां पाहि नित्यम्. May the divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the divine consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. I want to concentrate this morning on two very important qualities which are very necessary for our spiritual life. The first one is about moderation, and the second one is about how to make spiritual life a part of our being, not just a part of our day or a part of our week, but a part of our being itself. So we find some very helpful guidelines in some of these verses. The idea of moderation occurs in several places in the Gita. I would like you to take a look especially at these verses 16, 17 and 18 of chapter 6. I'll read those verses first, and then we will see what are the implications of those verses. Natyashnatastu yogosti nachaikantamanashnatah nachati swapnashilasya jagrato naiva charjuna yuktahara viharasya युक्तचेष्टस्य कर्मसु युक्तस्वप्नावबोधस्य योगो भवति दुःखः यदा विनियतं चित्तम् आत्मन्येवावतिष्ठते निःस्पृहः सर्वकामेभ्यो युक्त इत्युच्यते तदा. Success in yoga is not for him who eats too much or too little, nor, O Arjuna, for him who sleeps too much or too little. To him who is temperate in eating and recreation, in his efforts for work, and in sleep and wakefulness, yoga becomes the destroyer of misery. When the completely controlled mind rests serenely in the self alone, free from longing after all desires, then is one called steadfast in the self. So this is one of the challenges in spiritual life, how to avoid extremes. Most people who haven't yet awakened to spiritual life don't even bother about these things, unless it affects some of their secular responsibilities and duties. But when people turn to spiritual life in a serious way, and especially when we start doing some reading or listen to some ideas through lectures and retreats, questions begin to come in the mind. The topic of food comes very often in spiritual life. And then there are questions such as, what is the right kind of food that I must have? What is the right kind of quantity that I must have that will be helpful in my practice of prayer, worship, and meditation? How much should I eat? Or how little? How often? And what? Same thing with regard to sleep, especially when we read about some of these great saints and mystics. We read about the first generation of disciples of Ramakrishna. especially in the first monastery, in the Baranagar monastery, where they began staying after Ramakrishna's Mahasamadhi, how they sometimes passed entire nights meditating or chanting or singing the Lord's name. And then sometimes then we might wonder, oh, I'm not doing anything of the kind. Am I sleeping too much? So all these kind of questions come. And then some of us, in our initial enthusiasm, might go to the other extreme. If we feel we are eating too much, then we might reduce it to such an extent that it might become too little. If we feel that we are sleeping too much, we might reduce our sleep to such an extent that it might become too little. And that is why Krishna warns here that be temperate. Now we might say, well, if moderation means that I should sleep, I should rest, everything in a controlled way, but these mystics didn't seem to do that. So was it wrong on the part of these people who were God intoxicated, who sometimes spent the entire night praying and meditating? Well, that's not moderation. So which is okay? If that is okay, then this doesn't seem to be okay. And the answer is really not that complicated. As long as I have this question, this doubt, this dilemma in my mind, whether I should eat less or more, should I sleep less or more, am I working too much or am I working too little, am I resting too much or am I resting too little, as long as these questions remain in my mind, I should practice moderation. It's possible that when my spiritual life intensifies, when my love for God grows to such an extent that I might spend a long time meditating. I might forget that I have not had my lunch. I wonder if it has happened anytime to any of us, anytime. But sometimes we do see, maybe not while meditating, but maybe sometimes you are engaged in such a interesting activity, or you're busy doing something so important that you may not remember that your lunch time has passed by. There are instances in the lives of many great scientists. Sometimes they were working in the laboratories, or astronomers. They were scanning the skies through the telescope. And it was so fascinating, so absorbing, so interesting that they even forgot to have their meal that day. In fact, if I remember correctly, and I could be mistaken, I think one of the scientists, probably Louis Pasteur, but I'm not very certain. There is a story that he was so absorbed in an experiment in the laboratory that he forgot that it was his wedding day. Everyone was waiting at the church, and the bridegroom hasn't showed up. And when they went searching, they found him. He's so deeply engrossed in his experiment that they had to kind of drag him and say, hey, today you're going to get married. So it's not impossible for us to forget some of these important things. I mean, a wedding is an important landmark in a person's life. And also some of the daily things like food and sleep. But when we are engaged in doing something that is so interesting, so absorbing, it draws so much of our being, that time neither the scientist nor anyone is thinking, oh, should I eat too little or too much for this experiment to be over? So when that question no longer comes in the mind, then of course there is no question of moderation because you're not even thinking about it. But as long as we have this question in our mind about food and sleep and so on, we need to practice moderation. And the reason for moderation is this, that anything taken to an extreme will set up a reaction in the body and mind. And whenever the body and mind react very strongly to something, that becomes an obstruction in one's own spiritual life. And therefore, to avoid these extreme reactions, it is good to practice moderation. In fact, it's good to practice moderation even in our daily japa and meditation. And that's why teachers often recommend that when we begin our meditation practice, to just start taking baby steps. Do a little bit of meditation every day. And then when that practice stabilizes, when you feel comfortable, then make that your baseline. And then increase it a little bit, increase the duration, increase the intensity. A little bit, not too much. And then let it continue for a few days. Then when that new increase is stabilized, then you increase it furthermore. In that way, we can strengthen our spiritual muscles, if you like. It's a little bit like running. I'm not a runner, but I believe that even if those who want to take, say, long distance running, and you have never run in your life before, then it makes no sense to suddenly start running 10 miles a day. Well, your body is not ready for it. The muscles are going to react, the bodies are going to, and then maybe sometimes it happens that you do too much, and the next 3 or 4 days you can't do anything because the muscles are all aching. So even if you want to do long distance running, you find how much distance can you do right now comfortably. And then gradually, over a period of number of days or weeks, you keep on increasing your capacity, and then eventually a time will come when you can run long distances, which you may not have been able to do even 6 months or a year earlier. Same thing with regard to weightlifting. With regard to anything really, we should start with small steps. It's good to have a big ambition, but nothing, well, the cliche is Rome was not built in a day. So nothing happens in a single day. In spiritual life, through God's grace, anything can happen even this very moment. Some of us may not have to read the Gita at all. Krishna might appear before us. You might have the cosmic vision, and you will become enlightened. And then you say, okay, no more satsangs from next Sunday. I'm already enlightened. That's great if it happens. Until that happens, we need to go the hard way. Try to understand, try to learn, and try to practice. So what these 3 verses that we read show is the importance of moderation, importance of knowing our present strengths, being aware that I need to become stronger, being aware of doing the right thing with regard to food, sleep, work, recreation, and rest, something that will strengthen my spiritual life, and gradually working toward that goal slowly, slowly, and slowly. That's the ideal put before us. And then when that happens, it says moderation in sleep and wakefulness. Sleep is important because if the body and mind are not given the rest they deserve, then when I sit for prayer and meditation in the morning, I won't be able to maintain my posture. I might feel sleepy. I might feel drowsy. I might not be able to sit straight. So it's good to give the mind the rest and the body the rest they need. What we can question is, what is it that creates exhaustion in us? Now, body and mind are material objects. They have to follow the laws of matter. And fatigue or exhaustion is a natural consequence. what we can inquire is the amount of exhaustion and fatigue that I experience at the end of the day. What are the factors throughout the day that have constituted, that have produced this exhaustion in me? Now, some of the factors can be obvious. If I've gone into the garden or if I've gone to a farm and done some very hard physical labor, the body will need some rest. Or if I have done some intensive intellectual work, the body will need some rest also. So both, some of these very vigorous physical or mental activity will create exhaustion in both body and mind. But there are a lot of other things we do throughout the day which also go toward producing exhaustion. One of the things that creates mental exhaustion is just useless thinking. And we might discover, if we become mindful, that a lot of thinking that occurs is just totally useless. Our mind is like on a steroids. We cannot make it stop. It just goes on and on. It wants to think even when I don't want to think. It wants to think of things that I don't want to think about. So the mind is not under my control. And that's why throughout the Gita, again and again, Krishna will come to that central idea of how to bring the mind under the control. Because the mind, it's a little bit like recently, after the new update on iOS and watchOS, the Apple operating systems, some people found that their Apple Watch was not able to hold the battery charge for a long time, and they have I don't have any tech background, but apparently they were saying there was some kind of leakage of the battery power occurring, because of which the battery was draining faster than it should have. Then, of course, then you need to recharge the battery more often than you would have had to. That can happen to your phone. That can happen to, any of the devices that run on battery. Something similar happens within us too. We might find that we might be feeling drained physically, mentally, emotionally, more than some other people. They say, well, where is it all leaking? Why is this power being drained? And what spiritual teachers have often pointed out, that much of the draining occurs because of useless activity. That activity can be physical, mental, or verbal. That's the three things they often mention in Vedanta text. Kayena, manasa, vacha. Kaya means body, manasa is the mind, vacha means speech. So three ways our inner battery can get drained is through useless actions, useless thinking, and useless words. It's amazing. You might have heard, of course, that sometimes people practice remaining silent. The vow of mauna in Sanskrit, as they say, of not speaking. If you have never tried it, try it out someday. Even if you cannot remain quiet for a whole day, maybe just take a walk. Walk along the Charles or walk along any quiet spot near your neighborhood and make an effort not to think of anything. Some people find having a soothing music playing through their earpods might help, but nothing is really necessary. If you can just walk, take a nice long walk, not a vigorous walk, just a quiet, gentle, peaceful walk without thinking of anything, without speaking a word. Even if you're not talking with anybody else, sometimes we just keep on talking with ourselves. There is all these conversations that keep on going inside our heads. Stop that. Even if I can do that for an hour or two, you will see how refreshed you feel. And so one of the ways, it's very obvious really. If even an hour or two of that kind of silence, we feel energized. And then we realize a lot of our exhaustion at the end of the day is not occurring so much because of the work that we do. It's because of this useless talking, useless thinking, and useless actions. About Sri Ramakrishna, they used to say, some of you who have been to Dakshineshwar, where Sri Ramakrishna lived most of his life, or even if you have read about it and seen pictures of it in a book. So there is this courtyard, and at one corner of the courtyard is Sri Ramakrishna's room. Alongside there are these 12 Shiva temples. Then there is the temple of Radha Govinda, temple of Krishna, and next to that is the temple of the Divine Mother, Kali. Now, in order for him to go from his room to the Kali temple, he will have the Shiva temples on his right, the Krishna temple on his left, and then only after passing alongside these, he reaches Ma Kali's temple. So we read in his life that many who were there with him, his contemporaries, noticed that if at any time he came out of his room and expressly said, "Now I'm going to Kali Mandir," if that's the sankalpa, if that's the intention he expressed, then he would leave his room and go straight to the Kali temple. He would not so much as even look at the Shiva temple here or the Krishna temple there. He would go straight there. Now we might say, oh, how much exhaustion can there be by just kind of turning my head here and looking at there? True, it's not like a huge lot of drain, but it's still an useless activity. It's not like I do not know there is a Shiva temple here, or I might have seen it 1,000 times. But we will see that oftentimes when we are going about through our day's activities, we keep on turning our heads here and there. Not necessary. Now, of course, when you're crossing a street or when you're driving and you're taking a turn, you do need to look here and there, and that's absolutely necessary. That's not useless activity. But looking here and there when there is no real need to do so, that is a useless activity. Now, that's just one very minor example. But if we become mindful throughout the day, we will see hundreds of such tiny little useless things that we do. Similarly, pause a little and look at the conversations we have throughout the day. And ask yourself that when you are in a group, when you're with your family, with your friends, and then you participate in a conversation, sometimes it's good to just observe not only others but observe oneself and see that by saying something in a conversation, am I contributing something useful to that conversation, or I'm just saying something because I just feel like being a part of the whole thing, or I feel I must say something because everyone is saying, so I need to say something also. So if we find that if I can restrict my speech to either clarify something or to want to know something or to contribute something to a larger good, then I must speak. Otherwise, I can hold my silence. I can listen. I can listen more and speak less. I think it's worth trying. And it can be startling, actually, to find that so much of our conversation is just useless. And that causes that's another cause for the exhaustion we feel at the end of the day. Another cause also is there is a word about recreation here. So let me say a little bit about that. Now, some kind of activities which are very relaxing are actually very helpful. So if you have really feeling exhausted, then find something that relaxes you. If you're interested in baseball or football and just watching a game on your television relaxes you, that's fine. Or seeing some TV program or a movie or reading some book or a novel or listening to music, if that relaxes you and energizes you, and that's great, that's wonderful. But how much relaxation is the right amount? That we have to again find out for our own selves. Because sometimes our things that we do for relaxation can also be very exhausting. And then the whole purpose is lost. It's like sometimes people say, oh, I've had a long vacation, now I need time to recover from my vacation. Well, vacation itself was meant for recovery. Now, if I have to recover from my vacation, then maybe I could have spent my time during vacation a little bit differently. So that's the idea. Sometimes you might see, if you have been sitting before your TV for a long time, or even before your computer for a long time, although there has not been too much any physical activity, just sitting in one place, you can be utterly exhausted at the end of that day. Even if you're not doing some very profound intellectual work that needs concentration, you're just kind of sitting there passively, watching, surfing the internet or watching a movie, and then you can be so exhausted after that. And that is again because that kind of a passivity, both physical and mental passivity, and all these sound and images being bombarding, boom, 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 it sometimes might give us an illusion that, oh, I'm just resting or I'm relaxing, but actually it's pretty exhausting. All of these ideas need to be kept in mind. And why is it important? It's important because spiritual practice needs a lot of energy, a lot of prana, a lot of psychic energy. Now, if my energy is getting frittered away, exhausted. Now, yes, there are things all of us need to do in life. We all have duties and responsibilities. And while carrying out those duties and responsibilities, some amount of physical, mental, intellectual energy is going to be dissipated, accepted. But can we make sure that it's not being wasted? Because if I don't give enough rest, and if my energy is getting wasted in different ways, and then of course, when I try to pray or study the scriptures or meditate, and I find, oh, it doesn't make sense, I'm not able to focus my mind, I can't concentrate, my mind is getting distracted, I'm feeling drowsy. All of these problems come because I have not put my energy resources to an optimum use. So that's one very important point to be kept in mind. Moderation, and that moderation will deepen my spiritual life to an extent when I won't then have to worry about whether it's too much or too little. But as long as my mind is worrying about those things, I need to practice moderation and take baby steps. Yes, we all need to improve. We are all imperfect in many ways. Our goal is to become perfect. But if I can go about that goal in a systematic way, methodical way, gradually increasing my capacity, then I have a better chance of reaching that goal than if I do it in a very haphazard manner. So that's the first point, moderation. Now I request you to take a look at three other verses in chapter 6. These are verses 29, 30, and 31. So please check in whatever copy of the Gita you have. I will read verses 29, 30th, and 31st, and then we will quickly see what they tell us. Sarvabhutasthamatmanam sarvabhutani chatmani ikshate yogayuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sacha me na pranashyati sarvabhutassthitam yo mam bhajatyekatvamasthitah sarvatha vartamanopi sayogi mai vartate. With a heart concentrated by yoga, with the eye of evenness for all things, he beholds the self in all beings and all beings in the self. He who sees me in all things and sees all things in me, he never becomes separated from me, nor do I become separated from him. He who, being established in unity, worships me, who am dwelling in all beings, whatever his mode of life, that yogi abides in me. Our life as we experience it now is a life that is filled with differences. Emotionally and intellectually we understand that the goal is unity. At some level we are able to appreciate the idea of oneness, that everything is one, the spirit is one, the Atman is one. That's great. But as we go through our life, we are just seeing differences everywhere. I'm a different person, the people I meet are different people, there are trees and there are hundreds and millions of varieties of trees and plants, animals, nature. There are it's gazillion differences all around us and within us. So that's one big dilemma that we all have, that there is this idea of oneness, but the experience which is completely contrary to oneness. So spiritual life, as described here, really means, can I make an effort to see that oneness even when I'm not experiencing it right now? Because if I'm experiencing it, then I'm going to see it. Right now, I'm experiencing differences, and that's why I'm seeing differences. I'm not experiencing oneness, so I'm not seeing oneness. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Now, can I make an effort to see oneness even when I'm experiencing differences? And that's really the heart of spiritual practice. It's not enough to say God is all-pervading. It's not enough to say God is omnipresent. If God is omnipresent, then God is here, God is here, God is here, God is here, God is in every person I meet, God is in every object that I hold. So the implication of whatever belief system we have, if I truly believe God is everywhere, even if I'm not seeing God everywhere, even if I'm not experiencing God everywhere, can I remind myself as often as I can, through every step I take, every breath I take, that God is everywhere? Yes, because we are not experiencing it, because we are trying to remember that, we will forget very often. We will fail 100 times. But a true spiritual seeker is one who does not get discouraged by failure, who does not get discouraged by not being able to do something. So every time I fall, I must get up and say, yes, I haven't become perfect yet, but I'm not going to stop trying. Everything in life, that there are lots of things we didn't know. Well, when we were born, we didn't even know how to walk on our feet. Now we do. There are lots of things we didn't know, but now we can. Then why can't we also train ourselves to seeing God everywhere? And that should be an easy thing to do because God is everywhere. If I'm trying to see something which is not there, then it would be impossible. But I'm trying to see something which is already there, but I'm not somehow experiencing it now. The implication of that is staggering. Just see, just if I can simply have this one practice, that I'm going to try to remember that God is present in everyone and in everything. That every person I talk to, every person I meet, there is God present in that person. And if I truly love God, if God is one who draws my greatest adoration and love and worship and everything that is best, and if that everything that is best and adorable is present in the person in front of me, it'll be impossible for me to hate anyone. It'll be impossible for me to be nasty to anyone. It'll be impossible for me to get angry with anyone. All of these things happen when I forget that God is everywhere. God is in everyone. I will treat even inanimate objects with respect. There is an incident in Sharda Devi's life that once when mother was sitting and one of the disciples, I don't remember who, but someone in the room was sweeping the room, the kind of brooms that we have. Vacuum cleaners probably were not even there during mother's time. Even now in India, they're not that common. So the rooms are cleaned by using a broomstick. So there was this person who was sweeping the room with a broom, and after the room was swept, and this person just took that broom and just kind of hurled it in one corner. And mother saw that, and she called that person and said, "No, that's not the way you treat a broom." She said, "Well, this broom has been helpful to you in cleaning the room. Why can't you just kind of gently keep it where it needs to be kept so that next time you'll find it?" And we might say, well, like showing respect to a broom is like, that's too much. No, why is it too much? It's not like God is present only in this and God is not present in that. If that were the case, then God is not omnipresent. Then God is not all-pervading. So not only will we respect other human beings, we will respect and find that same presence even in animals, in trees and plants, in every object. There is so much concern about the environment. All of these love and respect for nature will come if we just remember this simple truth. And that is what Krishna refers to here. He who is being established in unity worships me who am dwelling in all beings. That's the thing. Sarva bhuta sthitam, verse number 31, that I dwell in all beings. In the Upanishad, in the Taittiriya Upanishad, it is said, Tat srishtva tadeva anupravishata. Having created, having projected this universe, Brahman entered into every tiny bit of it. So this practice of I think let's try it this way. When you wake up in the morning, just those of you who have received a prayer or a mantra from your teacher a good way to begin the day is just by mentally repeating that mantra. The first thought, the first words that should come from me. You might still be lying in your bed. You just woken up, and the first thing will be to repeat your mantra to yourself. The first thing your eyes should see is something that reminds you of your spiritual ideal. It could be a symbol, it could be a picture, it could be something that reminds you. And then, before you step out of your bed, if you remind yourself, God is present in everyone and in everything. And I'm going to make an effort to try to remember that throughout the day. So as you go quietly, get out of your bed, you go, you brush your teeth. God is present in the toothbrush and the toothpaste. You take a shower, in every drop of water that flows on you, God is present in every drop of water as well. To think about it, when you start practicing it, you will begin to see God in things you had never imagined before. It could be quite amusing, actually, and it would be all true. That is the thing that Krishna touches here. And this becomes possible if my life has been based on that moderation that he spoke about before. If there is this inner harmony by giving the body just enough rest that it needs, not too much, not too little, giving the body just the right amount of food it needs, not too much, not too little, and this applies to work, rest, recreation, food, sleep, everything. If I can do that, an inner harmony is set up within me, and that would help me then to practice this, feeling the presence of God everywhere and in everything. So these are the two ideas that we can continue reflecting throughout this week. The idea of moderation and the effort to try to see God in everyone and in everything. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. So let us take a look at some other questions. We have mentioned on earlier occasions that we should do our japa even if we are exhausted that day and believe that we don't be able to focus. Isn't that non-productive? Should we have a mini version of our japa for such days? Yes, there might be days when we are so exhausted and we might feel that either there is no mood for meditation, or we might feel that I won't be able to concentrate because my mind is engaged with a lot of other thoughts. Nevertheless, there is benefit in doing one's meditation practice every day as far as possible at the same time, just to maintain that regularity. Because we are creatures of habit, and skipping any of these things in the middle doesn't really help. And so, as they say, a mechanical meditation is better than no meditation. And so, just to keep that habit going, it's good to do at least the mini version, at least the basic minimum of one's japa every day, no matter what. Short of a nuclear war, that probably is the only exception when we can say, oh, there's just a war now. I hope that never happens. But in other words, none of us has any excuse for missing a meditation practice. None of us can say that I'm so busy that I don't even have 5 minutes for myself. I will never believe that. And so there is really no excuse. Can japa be exhausting? Should we feel relaxed or exhilarated after doing japa in the right way? Japa can be exhausting in the beginning when the japa itself is not really exhausting. It's the wrestling with the mind that's exhausting. It's like my mind, a part of me wants my mind to focus on my ishta and my mantra, and then there's other things dragging the mind somewhere else. Now that is what exhausts this. It's like if I'm being pulled in two different directions, it's going to be both painful and exhausting. So the mind being dragged here and there, that is what exhausts, not so much the japa itself. But when all those distractions go away and the mind is flowing seamlessly toward the spiritual ideal, then actually japa is most energizing. So if we feel, and there are times you will find that there are days when you really have good meditation, you feel energized after the practice. You don't feel tired. And so yes, it can be exhausting as long as the mind is struggling. Otherwise, it's just the opposite of that. In verse 29, Krishna says, see yourself in everything, in everyone. And then in verse 30, he says, see me in everything, everyone. Is he saying that seeing yourself in all enables you to see God in all? Every time when Krishna says me, he meaning the self, the Atman. When you and I use the word self, well, we don't use the word self so much as, well, we do say myself, but oftentimes we just say I am sitting, I am doing, I am talking. So our I is often related to this body-mind complex. But the I of an enlightened being is the I of God, is the spirit, is the Atman. So in pretty much most places in the Gita where Krishna is using the first person pronoun, it doesn't refer only to that historical Krishna, it refers to the divine self. So it really means the same thing. See the self in all, and Krishna saying see me in all is one and the same thing. In attempting to see God in everyone, how should we handle the situation where a person in one's life continually insults and degrades you? Continue in the relationship or not? Well, if somebody is insulting and degrading and that relationship is not going anywhere, one doesn't have to continue in that relationship. But even when one doesn't continue in that relationship, one can still affirm that God in that form is that God exists even in that person. Now we might say, well, if God exists in that person, how can that person be so insulting? How can the person be so obnoxious if God is present in that person? Now there are two ways of looking at it. One way is this, that God's light in that person is coming out through the body and mind. And the body and mind are not perfect. The body and mind are shaped by past impressions, their own ambitions and biases and prejudices. So the light of the divine coming out of this covering of the body and mind is tainted and tinted, colored by the imperfections in the body and mind. But the light itself, just like the light itself is neither good or bad, but it repels the reflecting medium through which it comes, can be imperfect. In the same way, the God present in such a person is complete. The God is not imperfect in any way. It's just the reflecting medium that is imperfect. And so even I don't have to continue in an abusive relationship, but that I should not forget that no matter how abusive someone can be, even in that person, the same divine exists. Now, the second way to look at it is the subjective way. And the subjective way is this: I should be seeing God everywhere. If I truly believe that God exists everywhere and in everyone, if I truly believe that God alone exists, then I should be seeing God everywhere. Now, instead of seeing God, if I'm seeing in front of me an abusive person, a terrible person, an obnoxious person, it's really my fault. I'm not seeing things clearly. If I had the clarity of vision, I would just see God in front of me. So, rather than putting the blame on someone else, one then says, I must correct my vision. But does that mean I have to continue in that abusive relationship? No, I don't have to. Sri Ramakrishna says that God is present even in a lion or a tiger. But you just can't go walk into a forest and say, oh, God is present in you. Come, let's hug. No, a lion or tiger doesn't understand that. A tiger is going to eat you up. And then you say, well, how can God eat me up? Well, God in the form of tiger is going to eat God in the form of a human being. That's just how things are. Ultimately, you'll be one anyway. So, there is a story of Ramakrishna's story about the mad elephant was running berserk on the street, and a person sitting on the elephant, the mahout as he is called, was telling everyone, get out of the way, get out of the way. This elephant is coming. And then people were running out of the way. And there is this one person who says, I just learned that God is present in everyone. God is present even in this elephant. And so he just stood there saying, oh God, how wonderful it is. And of course that elephant God came, took him in his trunk and just trampled him. Luckily he didn't die, but he was very badly injured. And then people who saw it, like, is this person gone crazy? He could have easily gone out of the way. And when he was asked afterwards, what made you stand in the middle of the road when you knew the danger? And he said, but God is present in the elephant also. And then his teacher came and said, well, God was present in that mahout, that elephant, that the person sitting on top of the elephant, who was telling everyone, get out of the way, get out of the way. Why did you not listen to that God who was telling you to get out of the way and chose to remain in the path of this elephant God in the middle? Again, the idea is there is going to be good and bad. There are going to be terrible people and there are going to be wonderful people. We have to protect ourselves from all of these influences. But even as we do what needs to be done, we should not forget the truth that God is present in everyone. And if I'm not seeing God in everyone, it's first and foremost my fault than anyone else's fault. So I need to protect myself, but I need to also acknowledge that I haven't yet acquired enough clarity to see God everywhere. For those who are not initiated into a mantra or an ideal, on whom can we meditate? How do we perceive God? Well, there are a lot of books on meditation, so one can really pick up any good book and try doing meditation on that. But if someone wants to take up the practice of meditation seriously, not just as a relaxing technique, a lot of people who meditate do it because, it gives me good sleep, or it removes my stress. So for that purpose, I prefer to call that a secular meditation. So if all that I want from my meditation is just a little bit of calmness and peace and some good sleep and a feeling of just feeling good about it, then I think any good book on meditation should be enough for that. But if I really want meditation to be a serious practice, if I truly see that realizing God a God vision is the goal of my life, then a book may not be enough. Then it will be helpful to seek help from some authentic source, because it's helpful to connect ourselves to some living spiritual tradition in order for us to progress spiritually. And that's very important. Next question. How do we balance curiosity with the need to not turn our heads left, right, so we can focus on the goal ahead? Even when we turn our heads right and left, if that is done purposefully, then that's not useless. So I'm not suggesting that when we are going somewhere, I should not turn my head at all. That's not what I'm suggesting. If I'm turning my head to look at something, I should do it because I want to look at it. That's something I want to do. Not just do it as a matter of habit. That's all that I'm saying. If I'm doing it purposefully, then it's not useless activity. If I'm just doing it mechanically, then that is useless. Since God is present in everyone, why do bad samskaras make more impact on some people, leading to imperfect personalities? Why doesn't entire humanity get enlightened and become free? Actually, that would be great. If entire humanity were to get enlightened, for one thing, we don't have to worry about the coronavirus. The pandemic wouldn't matter then if everyone is enlightened. But another way to look at that also is that, first of all, it's something that we have no control over. We just have to take the world as it is. Swami Vivekananda, as a teenager, he once said, as teenagers would usually tend to do, he said, looking at this terrible nature of the world and how it's not at all the way we want it to be, Vivekananda as a young man said, God created an imperfect world. I could have created a better world. Well, if we had any choice in the matter, we could say, well, let everyone be enlightened. Unfortunately, that's not how things are. And if you want to get more philosophical about it, then the question is there everyone? If I alone exist, I, the infinite being alone exists, then it's my misperception, my wrong perception that I'm seeing everyone. So it's not so much a matter of why isn't the entire world enlightened. It's more a question of why I am not enlightened. And if I'm enlightened, I'm just going to see God everywhere. This problem of the whole world being not enlightened, the problem of some people with bad samskaras, this problem will be solved if I become enlightened. And so the entire responsibility is with me. And me means not this me. Every one of us has to say me. How to determine how much amount for moderation? I don't think there is a fixed way to objectively say what is the right amount for moderation. I think every one of us has to figure it out for themselves. For some people, a 5-hour sleep might be enough. For some people might need 6. Some people might need 8. So we just have to find out for ourselves. And one way to do that would be to see how much amount of rest and food and work, etc., help me keep up my spiritual practices in a way that is satisfactory. If I find that eating too much affects my meditation, that means I should try to eat a little less. If I find that sleeping too little affects the quality of my meditation, that means I must try to sleep a little bit more. It is a trial and error method. And we all have to kind of try different combinations and see what works best for our own specific constitution. How do we see God in evil persons, such as politicians in power? Well, let me put it this way. Let's first try to see God in good people. We sometimes think that seeing God in good people is like anybody can do it. Its only problem is with seeing God in bad people. I think seeing God in good people is not that easy. Seeing good people as good people is easy. Seeing goodness is easy, but seeing God, not that easy. So before we start worrying about seeing God in all these terrible things, let's try to see God in things it should be a little bit easier. I mean, think about it this way. Not many people are able to see God even when they go to a place of worship. When I go to a temple, when I look at the altar, what do I see? Do I see an image? Do I see a photograph? Or do I see the presence of God there? So let us begin by trying to see God in a temple. Instead of seeing an image or a photograph, let me try to see God present there. And then I can gradually expand that. That if I can see it in one, if I'm able to see God in one place, in one thing, then that's hopeful. Then maybe I can then try to see God in something else. And let's begin by trying to see God in things and places that seem obvious, such as a temple or a church or a mosque. If I can feel the presence of God there, then let me try to see it in saints and mystics and incarnations and prophets and in good people. And if I am able to expand my perception of the divine in this way, then a time will come I might be able to feel the presence of God even in people that, humanly speaking, are terrible. Now, just because God is present in terrible people doesn't mean that we need to start worshipping them. Because God present in a terrible person needs to be dealt in a way that is appropriate. If you see God in a mad elephant, get out of the way. That's the idea. Well, we didn't study verse 32. In my understanding, it teaches empathy. Is my understanding correct? Verse 32 is, Atmaupamyena sarvatra samam pashyati yorjuna sukham va yadiva dukkham sa yogi paramo mataha. He who judges pleasure or pain everywhere by the same standard as he applies to himself, that yogi is regarded as the highest. Yes, that is empathy. And empathy practiced in a very radical way, putting ourselves in the place of the person we are trying to judge. Yes, you are right. It does deal with empathy. Do enlightened beings only see consciousness in sentient beings when they see others? Yes, it would seem so. The words of enlightened beings when we study, or their compositions, even through song or verses or their teachings, we see that they do see the presence of God, the presence of consciousness in everyone and in everything. In Sri Ramakrishna's life, we see how often he says he just sees the Divine Mother present in all. And in different ways, in different ways, that same idea gets expressed through the lives of all mystics and saints and enlightened ones. We spoke last Sunday about the disintegration that occurred in the body, mind, and so on. So one of the questions was how to integrate these different selves, body, mind, intellect, spirit, as one self. The practice of yoga helps. By yoga, I mean the yoga of knowledge. Jnana yoga can integrate all this through purifying the power of reason. We can integrate all of these through bhakti yoga, through purifying our power of emotions. Or it can be integrated through the practice of Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga, both of which do it by purifying the power of the will. So with any of these four yogas or a combination thereof, it's possible to integrate these apparently separated parts of our being. If we are Atman and Atman is Brahman, does it make sense to say God protect us in the same way that more dualistic theistic traditions claim? There is no harm in saying God protect us. And clearly, if one holds non-dualistic views, then the way that statement will be understood will be different than if someone uses it purely in a dualistic sense. So the words used can be the same, but the meaning that is extracted from those words will be different for that person. How to cultivate a spirit of detachment? It seems a difficult proposition, especially with our near and dear ones. Yes, yes, it is difficult. If it were not difficult, then everyone would have been enlightened. Yes, it is difficult. We often mistake attachment for love. So we should love our near and dear ones. There's no doubt about it. No true relationship is possible without love. What we sometimes make the mistake of thinking that in order to love someone, I need to be attached to that person. And there's a wrong way of thinking. And however paradoxical it might sound, it's actually detachment that leads to true love. So detachment and love go together. Attachment is a hindrance to love. And there's a lot to unpack there. But we have discussed it on many occasions before. Okay, that's it. We have come to the end of the questions for this time, and I have tried to answer some of the unanswered ones of last Sunday. So we will meet again next Sunday at 11 o'clock. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be.